Kale, Brassica oleracea sabellica, is a botanical variety of the vegetable cabbage. Growing this vegetable is not hard and it has many advantages, not only taste. This type of cabbage is very rich in nutrients, vitamins and minerals, and also has healing properties. Kale until recently was an overlooked and almost forgotten vegetable, yet its nutritional values were already known and used in ancient Greece and Rome. Until the end of the Middle Ages, kale was one of the most popular green vegetables throughout Europe. Curly leaf varieties already existed along with flat-leafed ones in Greece in the 4th century. Today they can be differentiated depending on the variety, low, intermediate, or high stem length with different types of leaves. The leaves come in colors ranging from light green through green, dark green, and purple to purple green-brown. The Russian variety was brought to Canada, and then the United States, by Russian traders in the 19th century. It is an edible variety of vegetable cabbage widely appreciated for its high nutritional value. It is a biennial plant relatively easy to grow, so it is worth planting it in a home vegetable garden. Kale is also valued for its aesthetic looks. It is characterized by decorative leaves with a rich, wavy texture. For this reason it is often used for decorating salads, decorating cold meats, and even for bouquets. Characteristics and description. Kale is a variety of cabbage with characteristic long and fancifully wrinkled leaves. There is also Tuscan kale with very long bulbous leaves. They may be green or purple in color. There are usually 25 to 40 leaves on one plant. It produces an inflorescence shoot in the second year. Kale is a biennial plant, however in the second year it does not grow as nicely as in the first. It is resistant to low temperatures, so we can enjoy the taste of fresh kale in the autumn and winter months. It can be consumed all year round. For consumption, dark green or dark purple leaves that do not have spots or damage are most suitable. It is especially tasty when frozen because it gains more flavor. Younger shoots should be harvested after frost because their leaves lose their sharp cabbage flavor. Late winter kale tolerates frost perfectly, even down to -20 degrees Celsius. This vegetable is quite expensive in the store, but it is very easy to grow, so it is worth growing it yourself. Growing kale is simple and should not cause any major problems. Soil requirements. Kale has the least soil requirements of all cruciferous vegetables. It is also not afraid of frosts. It will grow even with just a few degrees. It is a frost-resistant plant. Low varieties have the highest resistance. To ensure your kale remains healthy, plant it or place it in an area where other brassicas have not grown for at least 4 years. Growing kale at the right time helps ensure a decent harvest. It will grow best when planted in a sunny position. It is suitable for sandy and clay soil, but it should not be grown on only sandy soil. The root system is well developed and reaches deep enough that the plant can cope even during drier weeks, but it is worth remembering that it prefers moderately moist soil. Growing this vegetable is relatively simple, especially compared to other plants from the cabbage family. It grows abundantly even on sandy soil. It adapts well to difficult conditions and can be grown in more modest soil, provided it is first enriched with compost. Manure, green manure, or granulated mineral fertilizer work well for fertilization. Kale can be planted in beds after onions, carrots, lettuce, beans, or spinach, but not after other cabbage plants. The soil can be additionally loosened by digging it with a spade, shovel, or American fork to a depth of about 20 centimeters. This will prevent nutrients from being washed out and excessively penetrating into groundwater. Soil aeration is especially recommended for heavy and clay soils. It is then a good idea to mix the soil with sand, which will improve its permeability. Choose a location that receives at least 6 hours of sunlight per day, preferably where the soil is fertile, well drained, and has a pH between 6 and 7.5. If you are planting in early spring, you may want to choose a raised bed, as the soil there should be less waterlogged and compacted than that which is not raised above ground level. Watering. Kale, like other cabbage plants, should be watered abundantly. This is necessary especially on hot summer days and also when the leaf rosettes have fully developed. Plants that dry out or overheat are more likely to become bitter. It is a good idea to mulch them with grass clippings or straw 7 to 10 centimeters thick. This mulch should help keep the soil cool and moist while also suppressing weeds throughout all stages of kale growth. Seeding and spading. You can grow kale as a four-crop and catch crop. You can sow kale seeds directly into the garden a month to 6 weeks before the last spring frost, or in early to mid-April if the last spring frost is mid-May. Alternatively, start your seedlings indoors a month before you plan to plant them out, which could be mid-March if you want to transplant them into the garden in mid-April. Sow seeds for fall crop or flowering kale 3 months before the first fall frost. Kale is grown from seedlings prepared from seeds sown in May or June, which are planted after 7 weeks. It is in the first half of July at a spacing of 50 on 50 centimeters. Smaller varieties are planted at a spacing of 40 on 40 centimeters. It can also be a row spacing of 40 to 70 centimeters. You can plant 4 to 8 plants per 1 square meter. Seedlings should be placed in the soil at a depth of several centimeters. Remember to maintain appropriate spacing, because a fully developed plant can boast leaves that can span up to 1 meter. Experts advise harvesting kale in the second year of cultivation, when the leaves are most developed. The vegetable can also be grown by sowing seeds directly into the ground in June or July. Until mid-September, kale seedlings can be planted for harvesting in late autumn and winter. Kale can be harvested approximately 120 days after planting into the ground. When planting kale, we must remember that it can be grown in places after onions, lettuce, beans, carrots, spinach, but it cannot be grown in the same place after other cabbage and turnip plants. After harvesting, you can dig up the soil and plant tomatoes, beans, or potatoes there. It is also a good neighbor for beans, tomatoes, cucumbers, celery, and lettuce. It can grow on the edges of flower beds. Please note that kale should ripen approximately 10 weeks after sowing. Sow kale seeds 0.5 centimeters deep and 2.5 centimeters apart, in rows 45 centimeters apart. Keep the soil moist until the seeds germinate in 4 to 7 days. Once each seedling has 3 or 4 leaves in addition to its 2 seed leaves, thin or replant them so they stand about 10 to 20 centimeters apart for young vegetables and 30 to 45 centimeters apart if you intend to grow full-size plants. Production by cutting. Growing kale from seedlings is also possible for types of kale that do not produce seeds. Cut the tip off the mother plant, removing all but a few leaves at the tip. Then bury the lower 2/3 of the cutting in a pot of moist soil, where it should take root in about a month. Cultivation in a container. Growing kale in containers is possible and not difficult. It is recommended to grow kale and other vegetables in a pot with a diameter of at least 45 centimeters and a depth of 15 centimeters. If you choose ornamental kale to grow in a pot and intend to add autumn flowers to it, you may need an even larger container. Just make sure it has drainage holes. Fertilization. For fertilizing kale, I recommend organic and humic fertilizers because this vegetable is so-called dirty, which means it tends to accumulate harmful substances like chemicals. We can also use compost, because well-decomposed compost provides plants with safe doses of minerals and enriches the soil with humus which stores water better. However, if your plot is lacking nitrogen, you can add a high nitrogen organic fertilizer, such as 10 to 3 to 1, at a rate of 1 cup for every 10 square feet of soil. Apply once a month when the plants reach 10 centimeters in height, watering it into the soil. Before planting, you can add 200 grams of ammonium nitrate, 300 grams of 18% superphosphate and 400 grams of potassium salt 40%, per 10 square meters to obtain large yields. 200 grams of ammonium nitrate are used as top dressing. It is fed twice every 3 to 4 weeks. Fertilizers should be mixed into the top layer of soil and the surface should be leveled with a rake. However, please remember that nitrogen fertilization reduces the frost resistance of this vegetable. It can be grown in the first year after manure is dug in the fall, but it will also do well in the second and third year after manure. Care. Usually, this plant grows quite quickly and the large leaves cover the soil, preventing weeds from growing. We care for it in the same way as cabbage. When weeding the soil, it should be loosened. Harvesting. We do not harvest kale during or immediately after rain because wet leaves may rot and turn yellow more quickly during storage. It is stored at a temperature of 0 degrees Celsius and a relative air humidity of 90 to 95% up to 4 weeks. Kale stored in unsuitable conditions loses a large amount of vitamin C. How long you should let your kale grow will depend on how you plan to use the vegetables. Store kale after harvesting to maintain optimal freshness. If you prefer raw and tender young vegetables for salads, you can start harvesting kale leaves when the plant is 4 to 8 inches tall and about a month old. If you want larger leaves, wait until the plants are 2 months old and cook the leaves before eating them. For the best flavor, try to harvest all of this fast-growing vegetable before summer arrives. It tastes best when frozen. Frost makes it contain more sugar. How can you harvest kale? Use a clean sharp knife, garden shears, or pruning shears to cut or prune leaves from plants. If you want the plant to continue growing, you can select only the outer leaves from each plant, making sure to only harvest about 1/3 of these leaves. Wait about a week to harvest more vegetables this way. Alternatively, you can harvest the entire plant by cutting it off just above ground level. How to store kale? Leave the kale unwashed until you want to eat it, storing it in a sealed plastic bag in the drawer of the refrigerator where it should stay for at least 5 days. You can also freeze kale by first blanching it for 2 minutes, then covering it with ice water, then draining it and placing it in airtight containers in the freezer. Frozen kale is more suitable for soups and casseroles than for salads. Pruning kale. Although most kale does not require pruning, long-stemmed ornamental varieties such as the Crane series, which are intended for use as flowers in bouquets, will need to cut off the lower leaves. It is suggested that you start doing this when the plants reach a height of 20 to 30 centimeters and repeat this process a few more times until the stems reach a final height of 60 centimeters and are ready for cutting and stacking. Wintering. If you provide some protection, the plants should continue to produce greens throughout the winter, as some types tolerate low temperatures. In fact, frost sweetens their taste. Just remember that on warm days you will need to open your greenhouse or other structure a little to prevent your plants from overheating. Diseases and pests. One advantage of kale is that it is less susceptible to disease than most other brassicas. It may have diseases common to the entire cabbage family, including club root, which causes roots to swell and stunt growth. To prevent this, don't plant kale where other brassicas have recently grown and avoid planting it in oversaturated or overly acidic soil. Because kale also attracts pests common to brassicas, it is sometimes used as a trap crop to keep them away from other plants. Collect the worms by hand and throw them into soapy water to kill them. It is sometimes attacked by aphids and whitefly. In summer, white-tailed larvae often feed on it. Kale rarely gets sick, but be careful not to leave it in very wet soil for too long, as it may rot. How to use kale? All parts of kale are edible. However, as Time magazine reports, cruciferous vegetables are among the foods most likely to cause indigestion because cruciferous vegetables contain a sugar called raffinose, which ferments in the intestines. Fortunately, the healthier you become by eating nutrient-dense vegetables like kale, the healthier your digestive system will become and the better it will be able to process such vegetables. In the meantime, you can take a digestive aid before eating brassicas. This vegetable is edible with juicy leaves full of vitamins C, B, E, K, and H. They are recommended by dietitians to people who want to lose extra weight. The calcium contained in kale is easily absorbed by the body. Plants also contain beta-carotene, proteins, sugars, iron and folic acid. They are rich in minerals such as magnesium, potassium, and fluorine. Kale also has medicinal properties. Scientists have discovered that the chlorophyll it contains has anti-inflammatory properties and prevents dementia and diabetes. Other chemical compounds contained in it have anticoagulant properties and also lower blood pressure. Glucosinolates and carotenoids reduce the risk of cancer and cleanse the body of heavy metals. Therefore, kale is often indicated as a key element of a healthy diet and the preparation of balanced meals. Kale leaves are boiled and added to salads or salads in crushed form. Kale has a slightly bitter taste, but this is not the rule. Nowadays you can also find varieties that are sweeter and more pleasant to taste. These vegetables are perfect for storing in the freezer. Frozen kale does not lose its nutritional value, so even out of season it can be an attractive addition to a healthy diet. Varieties. Old varieties of kale are: low green curly. Height up to 20 centimeters, the leaves almost lie on the ground and this variety can winter in the ground under the snow. It is an early variety, its leaves have no bitterness. The later variety is medium tall green curly, grows up to 50 centimeters and is intended for consumption immediately after harvesting. It can also overwinter in the ground, but it tolerates frosts worse. The tall green curly reaches 150 centimeters in height. It is a late variety and contains a lot of vitamin C. The lark's tongue is up to 85 centimeters high and is a late variety. It winters well in the ground but has a very bitter taste. Newer varieties of kale include Chinese kale, often called Chinese broccoli because its leaves and stems resemble those of this vegetable. This tasty variety is said to be more heat tolerant than most other varieties. Cranberry ornamental kale, the Crane series, which includes red, pink, and white varieties, produces long-stemmed, rose-like, smooth-edged kale heads intended for use not only in bouquets but also in recipes. Camum flowering kale, like the Crane series, it offers red, pink and white varieties with green edges. Additionally, these ornamental kales have ruffled heads that hug the ground rather than growing on long stems. Russian red kale, this variety with purple stems and veins with blue-green leaves is said to be more delicate and mild in flavor than other kales. Tuscan kale or lacinato kale, also known as dinosaur kale or black kale, this type boasts blue-green to black leaves with a rough reptile-like skin. It has a chewy pleasant texture when used in recipes.